Hello everyone and welcome back to Weird Tales Talk, the series where I just do my impression in under 10 minutes of a short story that I recently read, either by Lovecraft or one of the other approved Lovecraftian style writers, In this episode, I'm going to be looking at Clark Ashton Smith's The Vaults of Yoh-Vombis, which is a story that was actually requested after my previous video, the first one in the series. Also, one more thing while I have you here. If you are subscribed to me, if you could hit the bell icon that's next to the subscribe thing, because I've had people tell me that when I upload something, they weren't alerted to it in their subscription feed. So the bell icon, that will make sure you actually see when I upload. And I don't upload that much, so I won't be constantly spamming your notification that, oh look, there's another upload. Okay, with that said, let's get into the short story. So, the plot of the story, without giving away any spoilers, is this. It's a story set in a somewhat distant future. Keep in mind this was written in the 1930s, so it's the 1930s idea of what the distant future would be. And humans are now living on Mars with Martians. Martians aren't really the focus of the story at all. They are in the story basically as much as, the natives of the swamps were featured in the Call of Cthulhu. Basically, they're there to lead the expedition team, which is featured in the story. It's about an expedition team who discovers these ruins on a far-off location on Mars that isn't really well documented at all. So it's an expedition team led by a group of Martian natives, and then they take the team to this abandoned temple, and it's like eons old, it's dusty, there's nothing there. But the Martians, they refuse to go into the temple, right? So about the expedition team, they think, it's just native superstition or something like that. So they decide, fuck it, we're gonna go in and have a look around. So they go into this abandoned, dusty, eons old temple, and then they find signs that the people there were sort of wiped out. They find a body of a Martian that is like basically crumbling to dust, it's so old, but it has this thing on its head, basically covering its whole face. If you've ever played the game Half-Life 2, and those things that sort of jump at you and stick to your face, and the zombies are like that, it's basically that is how they would describe these things. And then they find that these things are still not quite dead. The story is presented in a very familiar style that I'm sure a lot of you will recognize and even appreciate. If you recall Call of Cthulhu, you'll remember that the protagonist of that story is Francis Wayland Thurston, right? He is basically the one we keep hearing about in the story. And in that story, Call of Cthulhu, he uncovers the case notes of John LeGrasse. He was the detective who went into the swamps and found the idol and the cultists. It's presented in that sort of format. So we have a protagonist who is basically just recounting the case notes he found in his daily life. So basically, the protagonist is working in a hospital, and Rodney Severn was one of the expedition members who came into the hospital raving mad with lacerations all over his face that were self-inflicted. He looks like he got mutilated, but somehow he's still alive and raving. And then one day he disappears, and he was last seen running off back to the caverns from whence he was recovered. And the rest of the story is just presented as the case notes of Rodney Severn. When he came back to the hospital, he was able to write down what really happened there, and that sort of thing. And it's presented like that. And I really like that sort of presentation. It's very Lovecraft style. Not to detract from Clark Ashton Smith either, because he did it the same. I think it's just sort of something that is weird fiction writers tend to enjoy writing in that sort of style of presentation. The story has a definite Mountains of Madness feel to it, and it's not just me saying that. There was also S.T. Joshi. The edition where I'm reading this short story in is the Penguin Classics, The Dark Eidolon and Other Fantasies by Clark Ashton Smith, edited and notes by S.T. Joshi, and Joshi also points this out. The Vaults of Yoh-Vombis was written after Clark Ashton Smith had read the manuscripts numerous times of At the Mountains of Madness. And then Joshi points out that In short, in HPL's story, as in Clark Ashton Smith's story, a group of human explorers comes upon an immense city of strange architecture built by an alien race. This race has been wiped out by an even stranger entity. And that's basically the premise of At the Mountains of Madness, but is also the premise of The Vaults of Yoh-Vombis, which is probably why I really like this story, and I'm covering this even when I've only done one Lovecraft story so far in my series that I'm doing here. But yeah, if you loved At the Mountains of Madness, you will love this story as well. In fact, I would say this was even more concise. It's a lot more neater than At the Mountains of Madness, which is really a novella. It's not a short story, it's a novella. So at times, many people have sometimes criticized Lovecraft in that story for saying, okay, yeah, listen dude, fast forward a little bit, you know? So I think The Vaults of Yoh-Vombis is a much more concise story, and I really liked it for that. It's really like concentrated At the Mountains of Madness. Okay, let's do the things I liked and disliked about the story. First thing, I'll do my dislikes, because that's really not much. The Martians. I am really not a fan of this golden age, I think it's the golden age or bronze age of science fiction, 1930s, 1920s, 40s even, basically where they say on a distant planet in our solar system, like on Uranus or Venus, there's actually a humanoid species or something like that. In retrospect, maybe they thought, that would be possible, because back then we didn't have space exploration. But now that we know that there's nothing out there, it just seems a little bit ludicrous to me. That's just my personal thing. And the Martians in the story, I think I read the story a week ago, and now I'm just going over my notes again for this thing. But I think they said that the Martians had like 3 arms, and they had fur, and they had bulbous eyes, but they were intelligent. They were amicable towards us, coming onto their planet, and we basically got along with them. I didn't like that much. I just thought it was cheesy, and basically, in retrospect, you could cut out the Martians from the story and it would be the same story. So, for example, you could say, okay, the humans, they land on Mars, they begin terraforming it, and then try to develop land there to live on, and then they see, oh wait, there's temples here. Like, instantly you'll think, holy shit, Mars had life on it, intelligent life all this time. I think if Clark Ashton Smith did that, it would have had a bigger impact. Just like when Lovecraft wrote in At the Mountains of Madness that, they went there thinking they're going to dig up some ice deposits and maybe discover some bacteria, but holy shit, there's a sentient race of life forms, and holy shit, they just woke up and they're pretty pissed off, and oh my god, what is that? That's a Shoggoth, oh my god. I just think that had a lot more impact, because at that point, man was pretty much convinced that we were the only intelligent life forms ever, right? And now in the story, it starts off by saying, okay, yeah, there's Martians and stuff. Oh wait, there's a temple. That must have been built by the Martians. I just think if the explorers came and discovered this, holy shit, there's a temple, there would be a lot more of a bigger impact. So that part I did not like. But apart from that, everything I have to say is positive. So the things I liked. I like the fact that it was set on Mars. I really like Mars as a planet. I think I've always been interested in astronomy like Lovecraft was. And I think Mars is the planet which has entered into people's psyche the most out of all the planets, Because first of all, it's probably the closest planet. I don't know if it's Venus or Mars which is closer, but anyway, we have landed rovers on Mars. We've also done it on Venus, but Mars is the planet that we can actually land humans on and potentially live on. A lot of media has been set on Mars, the story in video games, literature, film. So Mars is a planet I really think is cool and has the most potential for that sort of horror type of scenario. I like the premise of the story greatly in that it starts off with this insane person comes stumbling in, because it immediately starts a lot of questions like, what are they doing here? Why are they so fucked up? Why is their face all scratched up? What did that? It cannot be a human that did that to them. That sort of thing. It gets my imagination flowing, as the characters in the story must be thinking, what the hell happened to this person? And then at the ending of the story, this is not going to be a spoiler, although it is at the sort of ending. It says that the insane character, he escapes from the hospital and then he feels this need to go back to the temple. you know. But that's also pointed out in the beginning of the story, so it's not really a spoiler. But what could have entered into this person's head that made them want to go back to something that basically drove them insane and destroyed their face? I mean, that is, oh, you know, you want to read more. I think that's really well written. What else I really liked is that humans are going into a place that they really should not be going to, you know. It's kind of like in some other films that come to mind is like The Cave. That was a sort of a B-rated horror movie. I don't know if anyone watched it. Or Vin Diesel's Pitch Black, or even the Doom movie. People are going to a place where they need to get the hell out of there ASAP, that sort of thing. I like that premise in general, you know. All of these things really appealed to me, and the presentation was really great, and the thing that really was the cherry on the top is the language. My god, you know, Lovecraft can write really well when he wants to, especially these very adjective heavy descriptive paragraphs about what is happening or describing some horror. And Clark Ashton Smith was basically saying, okay, hold my beer and watch this, you know, because his use of language is just really beautiful. He was no ignoramus or no half-arser when it came to writing or using the English language well. And I'm going to end my video here by just saying, yeah, you need to really get this, read the story. I'll leave a link to the book where you can buy the whole book, or if you just want to read that one story, I'll try and find a link to that where you can just read it online. It's about 9 pages, so it's relatively quick. I just want to read out some of the passages and the descriptive things that I really thought were really beautiful, and I think this is going to really convince you to get into the story. So I'm going to do that now, and anyway, thanks for watching and everything, and I'll see you next time. Perhaps death will release me from that abhorrent control which would urge me down to bottomless underworld warrens of terror for which the saner planets of the solar system can have no analogue. I was not troubled by even the least presentiment of alarm or danger, and I should have laughed at the idea that anything of peril could lurk in Yoh-Vombis, amid whose undreamable and stupefying antiquities the very phantoms of its dead must long since have faded into nothingness. I felt the unhuman alienage of our surroundings and the black, fathomless antiquity of the ruins like an almost unbearable oppression. With a dull, hideous grating, the uncovered door swung inwards, thick and ponderous as a mausoleum slab, leaving an aperture from which the nether midnight seemed to well like a flood of aeon-buried foulness. Then, startled, I beheld beneath my torch, far down beyond the door as if in some nether pit, a seething multitudinous worm-like movement of crawling shadows. The terror and suffering of that moment were worse than aught which the hells of earthly madness or delirium could ever contain. I felt the foul vampiric clutch of an atrocious death, and of more than death. My god, this story is just so fucking good. I really hope you guys pick it up. Anyway, cheers.